Happy New Day! I hope you are doing well. I have done so much research and so much learning since the last time that I made a recording for one of these that I don't even remember what I was initially trying to look up. I feel burdened with how much I know, and I'm not even sure how much of it is useful. But the time has come to continue. The next book, the Book of Belial, The Spirit of the Earth, Strength Within the Earth, is fairly short. It's only like 3 or 4 parts. Hopefully it's a single video. I mean, we finished the Book of Fire, the Book of Satan in the first video. So, here goes nothing. After I find the page, that is. There we go. The greatest appeal of magic is not in its application, but in its esoteric meanderings. The element of mystery, which is so heavily enshrouds the practice of the black arts, has been fostered, deliberately or out of ignorance, by those who often claim the highest expertise in such matters. If the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, then established occultists would do well as maze makers. The basic principles of ceremonial magic have been relegated for so long to infinitely classified bits of scholastic mysticism that the would-be wizard becomes the victim of the very art of misdirection, which he himself should be employing. An analogy may be drawn of the student of applied psychology who, though knowing all of the answers, cannot make friends. Pardon me. Definitely, the appeal of magic is one of feeling that maybe things are going to work out, and we don't understand it, but it's going to work out. And that's also what's unappealing about magic. Someone who wants to perform wizardry or wants to have power over the world wants to understand and bend elements to their will. So the Satanist wouldn't be interested in that kind of magic. I mean, there's a certain pleasure to be had in not knowing something, which I apply in my own life often, but also there is a need to know practically and for the sake of having a base to build your life off of. That just accepting that, oh, hey, it works. This guy says it works, and it looks really cool, so isn't acceptable. What good is a study of falsehoods unless everyone believes in falsehoods? Many, of course, do believe in falsehoods, but still act according to natural law. It is upon this premise that satanic magic is based. If you're not acting on falsehoods and you have scientific like pseudo-hypotheses, pseudo-theories that you're working off of, then it's not magic. This is a primer, a basic text on materialistic magic. It is a satanic McGuffey's reader. Never heard of that. Writing it down. McGuffey's reader. I will say that out of all the research that I did, I didn't look too hard into the different historical figures based here. I read a little about the life of the infamous forger, John Hepburn, or something else. I know his last name was Hebborn, Hebborn, and that was very interesting about the transmission of ideas and what makes something real or fake, and the way that people value art. But I didn't read into Huysmans or Miss Deshays or any of the rest of them. I actually lost the piece of paper that I put all of that stuff down on, so I had to go off of memory. Let's see. I forget his first name, but Mansart, the person who, oh, happy little squirrel out there eating berries. Nice. That person was in charge of making the Louvre and the Versailles Palace, Dr. LeVay specifically called him the architect of trapezoids, and that's because of the way that he built, Mansart built his roofs in terms of that they were trapezoid shaped and that they contained another floor. I'm not sure what roofs would have been like before that, except triangles and cones or flat surfaces. I will say that generally speaking, I'm not fond of his flair. He was generally classified as mixing Baroque and more Grecian styles together, trying to move Baroque architecture into what was at the time modern sensibility, and also his trapezoid roofs, and also for being very hard to work with, that you needed to comply with his schedule, and that he was a very, very snobby, picky artiste that would tear apart his plans every once in a while. I know that 2 people hired him for designs and then took the blueprints and had someone else make it quick before he was able to cross everything off and start over again. I'd hate that so much if I were an artist. As long as I don't need to put the name on the building, my name on the building when it's done. Alright. Belial means without a master and symbolizes true independence, self-sufficiency, and personal accomplishment. I know Belial as a woman covered in flames in a chariot with no horses, which I could possibly be related to that. Belial represents the earth element, and herein will be found magic with both feet on the ground. Real, hardcore, magical procedure, not mystical platitudes devoid of objective reason. Probe no longer. Here is bedrock. Perfect. That's exactly what I was saying. Something solid to stand on. Although at that point you really can't call it magic, because magic necessitates things work just because they do, which is part of the fun of it, but also why it can't ever be taken seriously. The theory and practice of satanic magic, definition and purpose. The definition of magic, as used in this book, here we go, is the change in situations or events in accordance with one's will, which would, using normally accepted methods, be unchangeable. So what is and is not magic is dependent on what era you're living in other words. This admittedly leaves a large area for personal interpretation. It will be said by some that these instructions and procedures are nothing more than applied psychology, or scientific fact called by magical terminology, until they arrive at a passage in the text that is based on no known scientific finding. It is for this reason that no attempt has been made to limit the explanations set forth to a set nomenclature. Magic is never totally scientifically explainable, but science always has been, at one time or another, considered magic. There is no difference between white and black magic, except in the smug hypocrisy, guilt-ridden righteousness, and self-deceit that the white magician himself, or herself. In the classical religious tradition, white magic is performed for altruistic, benevolent, and good purposes, while black magic is used for self-aggrandizement, personal power, and evil purposes. Many videos ago, like 3 or 4, I defined black versus white magic as in accordance with the will of the universal mind, or the meta-universal entity, or the earth mind, whatever you'd like to call it, overmind. Either in accordance with that or without the accordance, and whether or not you seek to do good for others or harm for others isn't taken into account. However, since then I've realized that everything is within purview of the overmind, and whether we try to rebel against it or not, it is still part of the overall plan that is inevitable by the natural processes through which life on an earthly material scale and a meta-universal scale propagates. Anyway, so yeah, there is no black or white magic. Although white magic is more expedient in terms of bringing about what the overmind desires. But I cannot in good conscience act on desires that I do not understand in a being whose functioning I have no material evidence or history of. So we're going to have to do some more research. Who knows, maybe the overmind is something that's improvable, in which case there's nothing but black magic by my definition. No one on Earth ever pursued occult studies, metaphysics, yoga, or any other white light concept without ego gratification and personal power as a goal. It just so happens that some people enjoy wearing hair shirts, and others prefer velvet or silk. What is pleasure to one is pain to another, and same applies to good and evil. Every practitioner of witchcraft is convinced that he or she is doing the right thing. Exactly. That by the processes through which life functions, we will seek to do what we consider good. And since, as a species, humans are able to generate more complex ideas, we have more complex ways of acting. Magic falls into two categories: ritual or ceremonial, and non-ritual or manipulative. Ritual magic consists of the performance of a formal ceremony taking place, at least in part, within the confines of an area set aside for such purposes and at a specific time. Its main function is to isolate the otherwise dissipated adrenal or an otherwise emotionally induced energy and convert it into a dynamically transmittable force. It is purely an emotional, or rather intellectual act. Any and all intellectual activity must take place before the ceremony, not during it. This type of magic is sometimes known as greater magic. Non-ritual or manipulative magic, sometimes called lesser magic, consists of wile and guile obtained through various devices and contrived situations, which when utilized can create change in accordance with one's will. In olden times, this would be called a fascination or a glamour, or the evil eye. So meditation would be a form of greater magic in this case. Like, we're completely submitting to Dr. LeVay's terminology here just for expediency and grappling with the real heart of his ideas. I can understand that. Most of the victims of the witch trials were not witches. Often the victims were eccentric old women who were either senile or did not conform to society. Others were exceptionally attractive women who turned the heads of the men in power and were not responsive to their advances. The real witches were rarely executed or even brought to trial, as they were proficient in the art of enchantment and could charm men and save their own lives. Most of the real witches were sleeping with the inquisitors. This is the origin of the word glamour. The antiquated meaning of glamour is witchcraft. The most important asset to the modern witch is her ability to be alluring, or to utilize glamour. The word fascination has a similarly occult origination. Fascination was the term applied to the evil eye, to fix a person's gaze. In other words, fascinate was to curse them with the evil eye. Therefore, if a woman had the ability to fascinate men, she was regarded as a witch. Learning to effectively utilize the command to look is an integral part of a witch's or warlock's training. To manipulate a person, you must first be able to attract and hold his attention. The three methods by which the command to look can be accomplished are the utilization of sex, sentiment, or wonder, or a combination of the following. of the proceeding. A witch must, honestly, decide into which category she most naturally falls. The first category, that of sex, is self-evident. If a woman is attractive or sexually appealing, she should do everything in her power to make herself as enticing as possible, thereby using sex as her most powerful tool. Once she has gained the man's attention by using her sex appeal, she is free to manipulate him to her will. The second category is sentiment. Usually older women fit into this category. This would include the cookie lady type witch, who might live in a little cottage and be thought of by people as being a bit eccentric. Children are usually enchanted by the fantasy that this type of witch can provide for them, and young adults seek her out for her sage-like advice. Through their innocence, children can recognize her magical power. By conforming to an image of the sweet little old lady next door, she can employ the art of misdirection to accomplish her goals. The third category is the wonder theme. This category would apply to the woman who is strange or awesome in her appearance. By making her strange appearance work for her, she can manipulate people simply because they are fearful of the consequences should they not do as she asks. I will agree that the spiritual realm, the psychological realm, the realm of the spirit, I mean, what is the distinction between the mind and the spirit, really, is all highly intertwined, and being able to manipulate people like this, I would consider, at least what I do when I perform witchcraft, like the ability to tap into what somebody's thinking and empathize with them to be able to read their mind, anticipate how people will act in certain situations and make it seem as though that you performed such a thing. And then on a greater level, actually interacting, I shouldn't say greater, on a different level, interacting with forces that are outside of, I shouldn't say the material, outside of the elemental realm, and compelling them by their psychology. And what evidence do I have for that? Hearsay. It's my own personal experience, which obviously doesn't hold up to any scientific scrutiny, but who knows, someday science might catch up, or I'll be proven wrong, and no matter what happens, I will be happy to learn the truth. I mean, it's worked for me so far. I'm rocking into the table, pardon me. And I also can't back up. I am not wearing anything with padding. I'll just push the table forward. There we go. Many women fit into more than one of these categories. For example, the young girl who has the appearance of freshness and innocence, but at the same time is very sexy, combines sex and sentiment. Or the femme fatale who combines sex appeal with sinister overtones, uses sex and wonder. After evaluating her assets, each witch must decide into which category or combination of categories she fits, and then utilize those assets in their proper form. To be a successful warlock, a man must similarly fit himself into the proper category. The handsome or sexually appealing man would naturally fit into the first category, sex. The second, or sentiment category, would apply to the older man who has, perhaps, an elfin or forest wizard appearance. The sweet old grandpa, often a dirty old man, would also be in the sentiment category. The third type would be the man who presents a sinister or diabolic appearance. Each of these men would apply his particular brand of the command to look, in much the same way as woman previously described. Am I guilty of this? Well, I say, wanting power necessarily isn't a bad thing. Yes, I do want power. Why do I want power? To be able to destroy power. But all of that aside, no, I'm not guilty of this. I've built this appearance of what you see here because it's something that I admire in others and I seek to emulate it. Not necessarily because I wish to control other people. Like before, I manipulated my appearance to be comforting, but not necessarily to gain sentiment, but just to allow other people's sentiments to fall onto me. I made a video about it, about clothing and morality, which goes into detail with this. Our clothing, our appearance, is a form of communication. Visual imagery utilized for emotional reaction is certainly the most important device incorporated in the practice of the lesser magic. Anyone who is foolish enough to say, "Looks don't mean a thing," is indeed deluded. Good looks are unnecessary, but looks certainly are needed. I agree. It's all about showing that you care. I'm not going to go into detail here. I already made a video about it. And at the time, that video was more of a question than an answer, and I've clearly come to very different answers since I made that video. But you can extrapolate what I was thinking. I wanted to make a follow-up, but I just couldn't get a script down right. Pardon me. Odor is another important manipulative factor in lesser magic. Remember, animals fear and distrust anyone or anything that doesn't smell. And even though we may, as human animals, deny many of the judgments based on this sense consciously, we are still motivated by our sense of smell just as surely as any all-fours animal. If you are a man and wish to enchant a woman, allow the natural secretions of your body to pervade the atmosphere immediately around you, and work in animalistic contrast to the vestments of social politeness that you wear upon your back. If you, as a woman, wish to bewitch a man, do not fear that you might offend simply because the oils and fragrances of your flesh have not been scrubbed away, or that place between your thighs is not dry and sterile. These natural odors are the sexual stimulants which nature, in her magical wisdom, has provided. Magical wisdom is one thing to call evolution, sure. Well, yes, it depends on what you want to use smell to communicate. I don't want to perform that with my smell. That's not something that I rely on. Nor do I want to be smellless. I'm actually not sure what I'd like to go for. I've been using a lot of synthetic musk recently, and that was nice. I know that I love my time in pine forests, and mainly what I want to communicate with my appearance is what I think of myself and what I want to be in the world. And so a pine scent would be appropriate. Originally, I didn't go for pine because I didn't realize that a pine forest really is as powerful as a scent would lead you to believe. And now that I know that, and now that I have a connection with pine forests, I would feel comfortable applying that scent to myself and incorporating it into working my identity out into the world. Or lesser magic, as Dr. LaVey likes to call it. Making people look in a certain way. And it's also true that such a look as this can drive people away, but those who are open-minded enough to come to a stranger would come no matter what, and those who are driven away, then it would be up to me to seek them out if that was something that I wanted to do. And if you run away from me when I'm coming to you, that's your problem. Or anyone, for that matter. The sentiments stimulants are those odors that will appeal to pleasant memories and nostalgia. The enchanting of a man through his stomach is first established by the smell of cooking, a sentiment type of which will find this one the most useful of all charms. It is not so facetious to dwell upon the technique of the man who wished to charm the young lady who had been displaced from her home of childhood joys, which happened to be a fishing village. Wise to the ways of lesser magic, he neatly tucked a mackerel into his trousers pocket and reaped the rewards of that great fondness may often bring. The three types of satanic ritual. Here are the three types of ceremony incorporated in the practice of satanic magic. Each of these correspond to a basic human emotion. The first of these we shall call a sex ritual. A sex ritual is what is commonly known as a love charm or spell. The purpose in performing such a ritual is to create desire on the part of the person whom you desire, or to summon a sex partner to fulfill your desires. If you have no specific person or type of person in mind, strong enough to cause direct sexual feeling culminating in orgasm, you will not succeed in performing a successful working. The reason for this is that even if the ritual was successful, by accident, what good would it serve if you could not take advantage of your eventual opportunity because of a lack of stimulation or desire? It is easy to confuse enchantment for your ulterior motives with spellcasting to satisfy your sexual desires. Gotcha. Enchantment for self-aggrandizement, when accompanied by ceremonial magic, falls into the category of either compassion or destruction ritual, or possibly both. If you want or need something so badly that you are sad or feel much anguish without it, and can obtain it through the use of glamour and enchantment without causing hurt on another's part, thank you, then this would incorporate a compassion ritual to increase your power. If you wish to enchant or entrap a deserving victim for your own purposes, you would employ a destruction ritual. These formulas are to be adhered to, as applying the wrong type of ritual towards a desired result can lead to a trouble of complicated nature. A good example of this is if the girl who finds herself plagued by a relentless suitor. If she has done little to encourage him, then she should recognize him for the psychic vampire he is and let him play his masochistic role. If, however, she has enchanted him frivolously, giving him every encouragement, and then finds herself a steady object of sexual desire, much to her dismay, she has no one to blame but herself. Such exercises are only ego boosts, born of an indoctrination of ego denial which makes these little bewitchments necessary. The Satanist has enough ego strength to use enchantments for her own sexual gratification, or to gain power or success of a specific nature. The second type of ritual is of a compassionate nature. The compassion, or sentiment, ritual is performed for the purpose of helping others or helping oneself. Health, domestic happiness, business activities, material success, and scholastic prowess are but a few of the situations covered in compassion ritual. It might be said that this form of ceremony could fall into the realm of genuine charity, bearing in mind that charity begins at home. The third motivating force is that of destruction. This is a ceremony used for anger, annoyance, disdain, contempt, or just plain hate. It is known as a hex, curse, or destroying agent. One of the greatest of all fallacies about the practice of ritual magic is the notion that one must believe in the powers of magic before one can be harmed or destroyed by them. Nothing could be farther from the truth, as the most receptive victims of curses have always been the greatest scoffers. The reason is frighteningly simple. The uncivilized tribesman is the first to run to his nearest witch doctor or shaman when he feels a curse has been placed upon him by an enemy. The threat and presence of harm is with him consciously, and belief in the power of the curse is so strong that he will take every precaution against it. Thus, through the application of sympathetic magic, he will counteract any harm that might come his way. This man is watching his step and not taking any chances. On the other hand, the enlightened man, who doesn't place any stock in such superstition, relegates his instinctive fear of the curse to his unconscious, thereby nourishing it into a phenomenally destructive force that will multiply with each succeeding misfortune. Of course, every time a new setback occurs, the non-believer will automatically deny any connection with the curse, especially to himself. This emphatic, conscious denial of the potential of the curse is the very ingredient that will create its success through setting up of accident-prone situations. In many instances, the victim will deny any magical significance to his fate, even into his dying gasp, though the magician is perfectly satisfied so long as his desired results occur. It must be remembered that it matters not whether anyone attaches any significance to your working, so long as the results of the working are in accordance with your will. The super-logician will always explain the connection of the magical ritual to the end result as coincidence. Like I was saying, I don't have any evidence that my dabbling in magic and then obtaining the results that I sought for were correlated, or no, correlated or causated for that matter. However, I got what I wanted, and I did the thing, so why not keep doing the thing if I keep getting what I want? I mean, I'd like to understand the mechanisms of all of this. I explained that clearly, I hope, but whether magic is performed for constructive or destructive purposes, the success of the operation is dependent on the receptivity of receptivity of the person who is to receive the blessing or curse, as the case may be. In the case of a sex or compassion ritual, it helps if the recipient has faith and believes in magic, but the victim of a hex or curse is much more prone to destruction if he does not believe in it. So long as a man knows the meaning of fear, he will always need the ways and means to defend himself against his fears. No one knows everything, and as long as there is wonder, there will always be an apprehension of the unknown, where there are potentially dangerous forces. It is this natural fear of the unknown, a first cousin to the fascination towards the unknown, that impels the man of logic towards his very explanations. Obviously, the man of science is motivated to discovery by his very sense of wonder. And yet, how sad that this man who calls himself logical is often the last to recognize the essence of ritual magic. If religious faith and fervor can make the bleeding wounds appear on the body in approximation to the wounds supposedly inflicted on Christ, it is called stigmata. These wounds appear as a result of compassion driven to an emotionally violent extreme. Why, then, should there be any doubt as to the destructive extremes of fear and terror? The so-called demons have the power to destroy in a flesh-rending manner, theoretically, as much as a handful of nails, long rusted away, can create blood-dripping ecstasy in a person convinced he is hooked upon the cross of cavalry. Therefore, never attempt to convince the skeptic upon whom you wish to place a curse. Allow him to scoff. To enlighten him would lessen your chances of success. Listen with benign assurance as he laughs at your magic, knowing his days are filled with turmoil all the while. If he is despicable enough, by Satan's grace, he might even die laughing. I don't approve of any of that. I'm not sure if it was... I'm sure in several videos I've explained why I don't believe in hurting your enemies. A word of warning to those who would practice these arts concerning sex or lust. Take full advantage of spells and charms that work, if you be a man. Plunge your erect member into her with lascivious delight. If you be a woman, open wide your loins in lewd anticipation. Concerning compassion, be resolved that you'll have no regrets at the expense of the help that you have given others, should their newfound blessings place an obstacle in your path. Be grateful for the things that come to you through the use of magic. Concerning destruction, be certain you do not care if the intended victim lives or dies before you throw your curse, and having caused their destruction, revel rather than feel remorse. Heed well these rules, or in each case you will see a reversal of your desires, which will harm rather than help you. Psychologically speaking, there's something to examine here. I'm marking this page. The ritual or intellectual decompression chamber. A magical ceremony may be performed by oneself or in a group, but the advantages of each should be made clear. A group ritual is certainly much more of reinforcement of faith and installation of power than is a private ceremony. The massing together of persons who are dedicated to a common philosophy is bound to ensure a renewal a renewal of confidence in the power of magic. The pageantry of religion is what has sustained it. When religion consistently becomes a solitary situation, it reaches into that realm of self-denial which runs concurrent with antisocial behavior. When religion consistently becomes a solitary situation, it reaches into the realm of self-denial, which runs... Okay. It is for this reason that the Satanist should attempt to seek out others with whom to engage in these ceremonies. In the case of a curse or destruction ritual, it sometimes helps the imagination if his desires are intensified by other members of the group. There is nothing in this type of ceremony which would lead to embarrassment on the part of those conducting a ritual of this sort, since anger and the symbolic destruction of the intended victim are the essential ingredients. On the other hand, a compassion ritual, with its unashamed shedding of tears, or a sex ritual, with its masturbatory and orgasmic overtones, would most likely succeed best if privately performed. It depends on what kind of friends you have. I feel like compassion rituals would be great in terms of a group. If you're all genuinely compassionate about the same thing, or towards the same people. There is no place for self-consciousness in the ritual chamber, unless that very self-consciousness is an integral part of the role being played, and can be used to good advantage. For example, the shame felt by a prudent woman serving as an altar, who, through her embarrassment, feels sexual stimulation. Even in a totally personalized ritual, however, the standardized preliminary invocations and devices should be employed before the intimate fantasies and acting out occur. The formal part of the ritual can be performed in the same room or chamber as the personalized working, or the formal ceremony in one place, the personal in another. The beginning and end of the ritual must be conducted within the confines of the ritual chamber containing the symbolic devices, altar, chalice, etc. The formalized beginning and end of the ceremony acts as a dogmatic, anti-intellectual device, the purpose of which is to disassociate the activities and frame of reference of the outside world from that as the ritual chamber, where the whole will must be employed. This facet of the ceremony is most important to the intellectual, as he especially requires the decompression chamber effect of the chants, bells, candles, and other trappings, before he can put his pure and willful desires to work for himself in the projection and utilization of his imagery. What Dr. LeVay is talking about right now is self-hypnosis. Plain and simple. And all of these tools to work the mind up into a frenzy, to what he calls decompress or self-disassociate, this catatonic, extreme dissociative state, suggestible state that people enter into during self-hypnosis would absolutely be affected by having this special room where everything goes the same. My nail polish, it's based off of the practice of mudras. It's technically is mudras, I think, but I have self-hypnotized myself to associate hand movements with certain physical and emotional sensations to assist me throughout my day, either close to the heart or away from the heart with each of these. And the colors also correspond and strengthen those feelings, such as having ritual objects. And I am consciously aware that I am fooling myself, that by doing this, I'm not more in tune with my passion, with my fire, with my heat, or I'm not in tune with my wind and my fear and my liveliness, or my stoic nature and my tolerance, etc., etc. But I've conditioned myself to respond as such and have that kind of anti-intellectual to serve a purpose goal. And this is a very useful thing to take advantage of the weaknesses in human psychology. I would be afraid, though, of employing this much self-hypnosis. I mean, I'd want to do a long-term study of people who practice satanic ritual and their ability to function in the elemental plane. The ingredients used in the performance of satanic magic. A. Desire. Oh, Part A, desire. The first ingredient in the performance of a ritual is desire, otherwise known as motivation, temptation, or emotional persuasion. If you do not truly desire any end result, you should not attempt to perform a working. There is no such thing as a practice working. The only way that a magician could do tricks, such as moving inanimate objects, would be to have a strong emotional need to do so. It is true that if the magician wishes to gain power through impressing others with his feats of magic, he must produce tangible proof of his ability. The satanic concept of magic, however, fails to find gratification in the proving of magical prowess. The Satanist performs his rituals to ensure the outcome of his desires, and he would not waste his time nor force of will on something so inconclusive as rolling a pencil off a table, etc., through the application of magic. The amount of energy needed to levitate a teacup genuinely would be of sufficient force to place an idea in a group of people's heads halfway across the earth. I agree. In turn, motivating them in accordance with your will. I mean, you can lift a teacup with psychic energy, or you could ask your pal to lift a teacup for you. In either way, your thoughts have been transferred, and I guess in Dr. LeVay's estimation, me asking my pal if he'd pick up a teacup is a form of magic that I have bewitched them to myself through having that sentimental connection. Yeah, Dr. LeVay does not draw any distinction between how genuine a person has to act to be performing magic or not. In this sense, every part of life is magical, and I, in a large way, agree with that. Magical in the sense of being more than just elemental. Not magical in the form of being unexplainable, like I've said many times. The Satanist knows that even if you succeeded in lifting the teacup from the table, it would be assumed that trickery was used anyway. Therefore, if the Satanist wants to float objects in midair, he uses wires, mirrors, or other devices and saves his force for self-aggrandizement. All gifted mediums and white light mystics practice pure and applied stage magic, with their blindfolds and sealed envelopes, and any fairly competent stage magician, carnival worker, or lodge hall entertainer can duplicate the same effect, although lacking, perhaps, the sanctimonious spiritual overtones. A little child learns that if he wishes for something hard enough, it will come true. This is meaningful. Wishing indicates desire, whereas prayer is accompanied by apprehension. I disagree. Bad prayer is accompanied by apprehension. Scripture has twisted desire into lust, covetousness, and greed. Be as a child, and do not stifle desire, lest you lose touch with the first ingredient in the performance of magic. Be led into temptation, and take that which tempts whenever you can. Take knowledge, know which temptations ought to be pursued. Move beyond what is just human. Dr. LeVay has he said this whole time, a very humanist approach to how life should be lived, and I disagree. Everything that humanity has done has been wrought by humanity, and things aren't going too well. Master the human spirit, overcome it, and don't give in to it. Learn to work in tandem with it. I feel like that's a sentiment that Dr. LeVay could agree with. Allowing it to empower you and not the other way around. That you are more than a human. B. Timing. In every successful situation, one of the most important ingredients is the proper timing. In performance of a magical ritual, timing can mean success or failure to an even greater extent. The best time to cast your spell or charm, hex or curse, is when your target is at his most receptive state. Receptivity to the will of the magician is assured when the recipient is as passive as possible. No matter how strong-willed one is, he is naturally passive while they are asleep. Therefore, the best time to throw your magical energy towards your target is when he or she sleeps. There are certain periods of the sleep cycle that are better than others for susceptibility to outflight influence. When a person is normally fatigued from a day's activities, he will sleep like a log until his mind and body are rested. This period of profound sleep usually lasts about 4 to 6 hours, after which the period of dream sleep occurs, which lasts 2 to 3 hours or until awakening. It is during this dream sleep that the mind is most receptive to outside or unconscious influence. Once again, this is well studied by hypnotists. It's more complicated than this, but generally speaking, he's correct. Let us assume the magician wishes to cast a spell on a person who would normally retire at 11 o'clock in the evening and then rise at 7 o'clock in the morning. Or 11 o'clock in the evening would be 23 o'clock global time. The most effective time to perform a ritual would be 5 o'clock in the morning or 2 hours before the recipient awakens. It is to be emphasized that the magician must be at his peak of efficiency as he represents the sending factor when he performs his ritual. Traditionally speaking, witches and sorcerers are night people, and understandably so. What better schedule on which to live for the sending of thoughts towards unsuspecting sleepers than during the witching hour? If only people were aware of the thoughts injected into their minds while they slept. The dream state is the birthplace of much of the future. Great thoughts are manifest upon awakening, and the mind that retains in conscious form these thoughts shall produce much. But he who is guided by thoughts unrecognized is led into situations that will later be interpreted as fate, God's will, or accident. But if you believe that there is a force, a life force, I should say, that exists primarily outside of the elemental realm, then it also stands to reason that it would be acting on you all of the time, since it's outside of time, including during the witching hour. And that since it is also acting on people who pursue witchcraft, that those people would also be influenced by this thing, etc., etc. There are times in each person's day that lend themselves to the receiving of the will of the wizard. Those times when daydreaming or boredom ensue, or when time hangs heavy, are fertile periods of suggestibility. If a woman is a target for your spell, do not forget the importance of the menstrual cycle. If man were not dulled through his stifling evolutionary development, he would know, as an all-force animal knows, that when the female was most sexually inclined. Man's snout, however, unsullied by cheap opiates, is not normally equipped to ferret out such telltale erotic scents. Even if he were so endowed with such olfactory powers, the object of his quest would most likely throw him off the scent through the use of massive doses of perfumery to cover and smother the offending effluvium, or eliminate detection completely by the astringent action of powerful deodorants. Despite these discouraging factors, man is still motivated to desire or be repelled, as the case may be, by his unconscious recognition of the change in a woman's body chemistry. This is accomplished in the form of a sensory cue, which is olfactory in its nature. To go backwards in what would amount to a return to the all-force animal would seem to be the best exercise for the conscious application of these powers. But squeamish might smack of lycanthropy. I'm guessing smack is another way to say complain or be fearful of. There is, however, an easier way, and that is to simply ascertain dates and frequency of the menstrual cycle of the woman who is your target. It is immediately before and after the period itself that the average woman is most sexually approachable. Therefore, the magician will find the sleep period during these times most effective for the installation of thoughts or motivations of a sexual nature. Witches and sorceresses have a much greater range of time in which to cast their spells towards the men of their choice, because man is more consistent in his sexual drives than woman, although there are many women with equal or even greater lusts. Day-to-day timing is not as important. Any man who is not already drained of all sexual energy is a sitting duck for the proficient witch. The time of the year following the spring equinox is the most fraught with sexual vigor in man, and he asserts himself accordingly. But the witch, in turn, must work her magic stronger, as she will find his eyes will stray. Should the fearful ask, is there no defense against such witchery? It must be answered thus. Yes, there is protection. You must never sleep, never daydream, never be without a vital thought, and never have an open mind. Then you shall be protected from the forces of magic. Or you can be aware of the way that your mind works. Like, you've seen these have an effect on me in the very video. And this would undo work that I have to redo later. If I just concentrate that this is just a finger, that it's just a color, just eliminate that whole... I do believe that there is an energetic loop that I've created through my thing. But if I undo the loop, there is no loop there. I honestly don't use this that much anyway. It was mostly useful when I was working a very demanding job. Okay. I feel like I've fairly well undone my hypnosis. Yeah, I feel nothing from this at the moment. I mean, aside from the normal physical sensation of touching your fingers to each other. But same thing about, well, there's more to it with meditation about how getting your back straight and the breathing and the rhythm and becoming present in the moment, but in terms of hand poses and the crossing of the legs, etc., a lot of it has to do with getting yourself into a suggestible state, like the contemplating of mandalas and very detailed religious symbolic imagery. The use of incense and chanting to create a religious atmosphere. Even to this day, I'm not sure why I was so surprised by this. It only makes sense that religious Christian music, even to this day, is pretty good. I mean, they have to be, because they are trying as hard as they can to influence people to believe something that is not scientifically evident. And create like a collective consciousness, and unconsciousness, a groupthink, a mob mentality within the church. I think it's a beautiful thing. In separated from what any particular religion is trying to do, people coming together like that, the combining of their thoughts and their will is a beautiful thing. It's an expression of love in a really real way. Very, what's it called? Genuine way. Imagery. The adolescent boy who takes great care in carving on a tree a heart containing his and his love object's initials. The little chap who sits by the hour drawing his conception of sleek automobiles. The tiny girl who rocks a scuffed and ragged doll in her arms and thinks of it as her beautiful little baby. These capable witches and warlocks, these natural magicians, are employing the magical ingredient known as imagery, and the success of any ritual depends on it. Children, not knowing or caring if they possess artistic skill or other creative talents, pursue their goals through the use of imagery of their own manufacture, whereas civilized adults are much more critical of their own creative efforts. This is why a primitive magician can utilize a mud doll or crude drawing to successful advantage in his magical ceremonies. To him, the image is as accurate as needs be, because his mind is able to fill in the gaps. He's more able to self-deceive and thus create drive, in a sense. There's the psychological principle that if you believe something, you're going to act as if it is true, and thus you're going to be more likely to create it in the real world. If you think that I'm the boss and I'm able to get stuff done, then you're going to carry that attitude, and then people are going to be more likely to listen to you and get stuff done in that way. Generally speaking, of course. And that's why to get a mob mentality, you need to put a lot more care into it, because not everyone going in there is going to be ready for such a meditative endeavor. Anything which serves to intensify the emotions during a ritual will contribute to its success. Any drawing, painting, sculpture, writing, photograph, article of clothing, scent, sound, music, tableau, or contrived situation that can be incorporated into the ceremony will serve the sorcerer well. Imagery is a constant reminder, an intellect-saving device, a working substitute for the real thing. Imagery can be manipulated, set up, modified, and created, all according to the will of the magician, and the very blueprint that is created by imagery becomes the formula which leads to reality. The idea of what is knowledge, what is memory, and how real is it compared to the world is applicable here, that whole realm of thought in philosophical study. If you wish to enjoy sexual pleasures with the one of your choice, you must create the situation you desire on paper, canvas, by written word, etc., as overstated a way as possible, as an integral part of the ceremony. If you have material desires, you must gaze upon images of them. Surround yourself with the smells and sounds conducive to them. Create a lodestone which will attract the situation or thing that you wish. To ensure the destruction of an enemy, you must destroy them by proxy. They must be shot, stabbed, sickened, burned, smashed, drowned, or rent in the most vividly convincing manner. It is easy to see why the religions of the right-hand path frown upon the creation of graven images. The imagery used by the sorcerer is a working mechanism for material reality, which is totally opposed to esoteric spirituality. Well, that's not true, like I just said. Well, I guess he's talking about some kind of bastardized, pseudo-Eastern inspired New Age hullabaloo that was going on. And I'm not sure how much of a right I have to criticize that. I've been researching and have researched a lot of New Age beliefs and movements. But in a large way, what Dr. LaVey is describing here is a New Age movement. I mean, it's weird to say, this is a book that comes from the 60s, I've said that many times, but all the other New Age movements from the 80s and all that. I guess just what he was saying about the mimetic evolution of ideas, in that the Catholic Mass of today would have been a black mass to the churchgoers of 2,000 years ago. And that practices such as these, I lost my mark, oh well, live or die on their results. And I suppose that's how you could say that certain New Age movements are successes, are failures. And I would have to say that, I mean, at least as far as I know, there aren't too many LaVeyan Satanists around, and thus Dr. LaVey's work hasn't had much of an effect, and thus, could you say that even though it's worked for him, and I guess I've employed similar magical rituals, even if I disagree with the general philosophy of what he's going for here, by his own description, would Dr. LaVey's work be a failure? If a Greek gentleman of magical persuasion once wanted a woman who would satisfy his every desire, and so obsessed with the unfound object of his dreams was he, that he went about constructing such a wonderful creature. His work completed, he fell so convincingly and irrevocably in love with the woman he had created, that she was no longer stone, but mortal flesh and alive and warm. And so the magus, Pygmalion, received the greatest of magical benedictions, and the beautiful Galatea was his. That's true. Someone actually fell in love with a statue they built. Which I could say, yeah, that's fair to say that within this construct, that was a successful ritual. D. Direction. One of the most overlooked ingredients in the working of magic is the accumulation and subsequent direction of force towards an effective end. Altogether, too many would-be witches and warlocks will perform a ritual, then go about with tremendous anxiety waiting for the first sign of a successful working. For all intent and purpose, they might as well get down on their knees and pray, for their very anxiety in waiting for the desired results only nullifies any real chance of success. Furthermore, with this attitude, it is doubtful that enough concentrated energy to even perform a proper ceremony could be stored up in the first place. Exactly. In order for it to be real, you need to think it's real. And that only applies in certain cases, of course. Like my whole thing with the mudras, this one doesn't work anymore. I'm going to have to fix that later, because who knows, I might need it. But the other ones, they still work, give or take. But the point is that I myself believe in them, and then the real world effect allows me to function better. But if I weren't sure if they work or not, yeah, like, there's still, like, something, but it's weaker now, and that's because I'm questioning it. Like Dr. LaVey said, this is a lot of psychological practice. To dwell upon or constantly complain about the situation upon which your ritual would be based only guarantees the weakening of what should be ritualistically directed force by spreading it thin and diluting it. Once the desire has been established strongly enough to employ the forces of magic, then every attempt must be made to symbolically give vent to these wishes in the performance of the ritual, not before or after. The purpose of the ritual is to free the magician from the thoughts that would consume him, were he to dwell upon them constantly. Contemplation, daydreaming, and constant scheming burns up emotional energy that could be gathered together in a dynamically usable force, not to mention the fact that normal productivity is severely depleted by such consuming anxiety. The witch who casts her spells between long waits by telephone, anticipating her would-be lover's call. The destitute warlock who invokes Satan's blessing, then waits on pins and needles for the check to arrive. The man, saddened by the injustices wrought upon him, who, having cursed his enemy, plods his way, long of face and furrowed of brow. All are common examples of misdirected emotional energy. Small wonder that the white magician fears retribution after casting an evil spell. Retribution to the guilt-ridden sender would be assured by their very conscience-stricken state. E. The balance factor. The balance factor is an ingredient employed in the practice of ritual magic, which applies to the casting of lust and compassion rituals more than in the throwing of a curse. This ingredient is a small but extremely important one. A complete knowledge and awareness of this factor is an ability few witches and warlocks ever attain. This is, simply, knowing the proper type of individual and situation to work your magic on for the easiest and best results. Knowing one's own limitations is a rather odd bit of introspection, it would seem, for a person who should be able to perform the impossible, but under many conditions it can make the difference between success and failure. If attempting to attain your goal through either greater or lesser magic, you find yourself failing consistently, think about these things. Have you been the victim of a misdirected, overblown ego which has caused you to want something or someone when the chances are virtually non-existent? Are you a talentless, tone-deaf individual who is attempting, through magic, to receive great acclaim for your unmusical voice? Are you a plain, glamourless witch with oversized feet, nose, and ego, combined with an advanced case of acne, who is casting love spells to catch a handsome young movie star? Are you a gross, lumpy, lewd-mouthed, snaggle-toothed loafer who is desirous of a luscious young stripper? If so, you'd better learn to use the balance factor, or else expect to fail consistently. To be able to adjust one's wants to one's capabilities is a great talent, and too many people fail to realize that if they are unable to obtain the maximum, half a loaf can be better than none. The chronic loser is always the man who, having nothing, if unable to make $1 million, will reject any chance to make 50,000 with a disgruntled sneer. One of the magician's greatest weapons is knowing himself, his talents, abilities, physical attractions and detractions, etc., and when, where, and with whom to utilize them. The man with nothing to offer, who approaches the man who is successful with grandiose advice and the promise of great wealth, has the alacrity of a flea climbing up the elephant's leg with the intention of rape. The aspiring witch who deludes herself into thinking a powerful enough working will always succeed, despite a magical imbalance, is forgetting one essential rule. Magic is like nature itself, and success in magic requires working in harmony with nature, not against it. He's also contradicting himself here, or at least I think he is. Let me go back to the start of the chapter. His definition of magic. The change in situations or events in accordance with one's will, which would, using normally accepted methods, be unchangeable. All right, so it's not about accomplishing the impossible, it's accomplishing the abnormal. Well, those weren't his exact words, but good. So he's not contradicting himself. And definitely, magic gives you an edge, but it is in no ways a certainty, depending on what you're trying to do. Pardon me. Here we go. The Satanic Ritual. And we've got ourselves a nice little pentagram pentacle here. Part A. Notes which are to be observed before beginning the ritual. 1. Person performing ritual stands facing the altar and symbol of Baphomet throughout the ritual, except when other positions are specifically indicated. If possible, the altar should be against the west wall, which in my house would be over there beyond the camera. In rituals performed by one person, the role of the priest is not required. When more than one person is involved in the ceremony, one of them must act as a priest. In a private ritual, the sole performer follows the instructions for the priest. Whenever the words Shem Hamvrash and Hail Satan are spoken by the person acting as priest, the other participants will repeat the words after him. The gong is struck following the other participants' response to Hail Satan! Conversing, except within the context of ceremony, and smoking are prohibited after the bell is rung at the beginning until after it is rung again at the end of the ritual. The Book of Belial contains the principles of satanic magic and ritual. Before attempting the rituals in the Book of Leviathan, it is imperative that you read and understand the complete Book of Belial. Until you have done so, no degree of success can be expected from the 13 steps which follow. Part B, the 13 steps. See devices used in a satanical ritual on pages 134 to 130 for detailed instructions. I'm just going to take a little peek here. Oh, it's just a couple of pages ahead. Well, we'll get there in a moment. 1. Dress for ritual. 2. Assemble devices for ritual. Light candles and shut out all outside light sources. Place parchments to the right and left of altar as indicated. If a woman is used as the altar, she now takes her position, head pointing south, feet pointing north. Which would mean if you're facing west towards the wall and the altar being placed against the wall, that you would be facing the woman's left side. No, feet facing west, feet pointing south. Yeah, face her left side. No, feet pointing north, you'd be facing her right side, sorry. Purification of the air by ringing of the bell. Well, that would be more of a purification of, like, getting the mind's attention, clarifying everybody's thoughts momentarily, like a snap. Invocation to Satan and infernal names which follow, see the Book of Leviathan, are now read aloud by the priest. Participants will repeat each infernal name after it has been said by the priest. Drink from chalice. Turning counterclockwise, the priest points with the sword to each cardinal point of the compass and calls forth the respective princes of hell, Satan from the south, Lucifer from the east, Belial from the north, and Leviathan from the west. Perform the benediction with the phallus. The priest read aloud appropriate invocation for respective ceremony, lust, compassion, or destruction. See the Book of Leviathan. 10. In the case of a personalized ritual, this step is extremely important. Solitude is compatible with the expressing of the most secret desires, and no attempt to hold back should be made in the acting out, verbalizing, or casting of images pertaining to your desires. It is at this step that your blueprint is drawn, wrapped, and sent off to the recipient of your working. A. 10. All right. So I guess this would be 10A. Or where are we continuing? Yeah, this is 10A. To summon one for lustful purposes or to establish a sexually gratifying situation. And like he said earlier, also for romance in general. Leave the area of the altar and remove yourself to that place, either in the same room or without. That will be the most conducive to the working of the respective ritual. Then fashion whatever imagery you possibly can that will parallel in as exact a way possible the situation towards which you strive. Remember, you have 5 senses to utilize, so do not feel you must limit your imagery to one. Here are devices that may be employed, either alone or in any combination. Graphic imagery, such as drawing, paintings, etc. Written imagery, such as stories, plays, descriptions and desires, and an eventual outcome of the same. Acting out the desire in tableau or playlet, either as yourself or portraying the role of the object of your desire. Transference, using any devices necessary to intensify imagery. Any odors relative to the desired person or situation, and any sounds or background noises conducive to a strong image. Intense sexual feeling should accompany this step of the ritual, and after sufficient imagery is obtained, as strong an orgasm as is possible should serve as a climax to this step. This climax should be attained using any masturbatory and autoerotic means necessary. After orgasm is obtained, return to the location of the altar and proceeds with step number 11 on page 134, where we start getting into the devices. What did he call them? Ritual devices. B. To ensure the help or success for one who has your sympathy or compassion, including yourself. Remain in close proximity of the altar and with as vivid a mental image as possible of the person you wish to help, or intense self-pity. State your desire in your own terms. Well, compassion, of course, feeling compassion and cultivating it is important. State your desire in your own terms. Should your emotions be genuine enough, they will be accompanied by the shedding of tears, which should be allowed to flow without restraint. After this exercise in sentiment is completed, proceed to step number 11. C. To cause the destruction of an enemy. Remain in the area of the altar unless imagery is more easily obtained in another spot, such as in the vicinity of the victim. Producing the image of the victim, proceed to inflict the destruction upon the effigy in the manner of your choice. This can be done in the following ways. Sticking pins of nails into a doll representing your victim. The doll may be cloth, waxwood, vegetable matter, etc. It's funny that in part B, he doesn't say anything about having imagery. I mean, if that's the case, then why would you also not need imagery for sexual gratification or not need imagery for destruction? If this whole, if you feel it strongly enough, you don't need it attitude. Like he said, really proficient magicians can do with less and less and less elemental stimuli to have a psychological or spiritual effect. The creation of graphic imagery depicting the method of your victim's destruction, drawings, paintings, etc. The creation of a vivid literary depiction of your victim's ultimate end. A detailed soliloquy directed at the intended victim, describing his torments and annihilation. Mutilation, injury, infliction of pain or illness by proxy using any other means or devices desired. Intense, calculated hatred and disdain should accompany this step of the ceremony, and no attempt should be made to stop this step until the expended energy results in a state of relative exhaustion on the part of the magician. When this exhaustion ensues, proceed to step 11. 11A. If requests are written, they are now read aloud by the priest, and then burned in the flames of the appropriate candle. Shem Hamthrash and Hail Satan is said after each request. If requests are given verbally, participants, one at a time, now tell them to the priest. He then repeats in his own words, those which are most emotionally stimulating to him, the request. Shem Hamthrash and Hail Satan are said after each request. Appropriate Enochian key is now read by the priest as evidence of the participants' allegiance to the powers of darkness. Ringing of the bell as pollutionary, and then the words, "So it is done," are spoken by the priest. End of ritual. Well, the whole thing here is that if you want your ritual to be effective, and you want the imagery to be effective, you want it to be affective imagery. And for a lot of people, calling on the powers of darkness and using demons as symbols and ideals in the way that Dr. LeVay does is not affective imagery. But definitely the principles of the Satanic Mass and recombining, rehashing the symbology in different ways would absolutely be effective. Let me think. Like, it's entirely possible to perform this type of ritual using just Christian imagery or Buddhist imagery with Jesus instead of Baphomet, or, calling on the names of saints as a benediction, and then blood of Christ and hallelujah. I mean, it's the same idea. It would just be a very, very different kind of Christian ritual. especially here, like an understanding of the satanic doctrine and Satan as a symbol is that Satan exists inside all of us, and that a prayer through the Satan, by this Hail Satan, and I'm not sure of what phrase is using here. It definitely sounds like it's related to Yiddish or Hebrew, Shem Ham Parash. I know that Shem and Ham were two of the sons of Noah that were sinful for some reason. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. My apologies. I'm really just having a off day, you know? Hopefully you can remember what I was saying, and hopefully you can extrapolate what my meaning was, because I need another sip of tea, which is cold. Oh yeah, the magic of tea. If Satan is yourself, then Hail Satan is saying, hailing my own power. So perhaps that's less effective. Or if it's a group ritual, hail our own power, or the mind of Satan, the node of Satan acting through us, our own inner Satan, accuser. And also, there's the duality here, that they specifically say that Satan is the cardinal spirit of the South, yet he is the one that they always call out to as like the chiefest of the demons. I guess that's the whole thing about the suspension of disbelief, the decompression, that you just need to go with the flow and accept that that is the way things are. I mean, in my own understanding of the universe, it is through self-negation that all is born, that through the void, from the fact that nothing cannot be, that the act of movement is the separation from nothing, nothing from nothing, creating something. There we go. Clothing. Black robes are worn by the male participants. The robes may be cowled or hooded, and if desired, may cover the face. The purpose in covering the face is to allow the participant freedom to express emotion in the face without concern. It also lessens distraction on the part of one participant towards another. I agree. That's part of why I enjoy masks so much. I mean, the face is a mask anyway, but, the persona, but it allows you to relate with different aspects of the self. I usually have a mask on my marionette head up there. I got it because I enjoy making hats, but the marionette head is too small. Mannequin, not marionette. Female participants wear garments which are sexually suggestive, or all-black clothing for older women. Amulets bearing the sigil of Baphomet or traditional pentagram of Satan are worn by all participants. Okay, that seems a little sexist. Like you said yourself that men can be sexual magicians, so why can't some of them come to the ceremony nude or in a banana hammock, huh? Why is it that only older women can should be wearing all robes? That might make sense if a man is the one performing the ritual and it's a ritual of a sexual ritual, that I guess you just have someone who's willing to help you in that regard. But you're saying for all ritual, and no, that's sexist, Dr. LeVay. I'm calling you out on that. And although you've passed away, I'm sorry for calling out a dead person. I wish you well. I call out your idea. There we go. Robes are donned by men before entering the ritual chamber and are worn throughout the ritual. Men may substitute all clothing for black robes, all black clothing for black robes. Black is chosen for the attire in the ritual chamber because it is symbolic of the powers of darkness. Sexually appealing clothing is worn by women for the purpose of stimulating the emotions of the male participants and thereby intensifying the outpouring of adrenal or bioelectrical energy, which will ensure a more powerful working. Except it may, I should say, distract them from being themselves and might distract the men from where their energy was supposed to be directed. I mean, if their pal Sarah is in a very nice bikini and jiggling all about right next to you. Alright. That was just the first name that popped into head. It's like the only person that I know who watched these videos is a friend of mine named Sarah, so if you're watching this, it's complete coincidence. Alright. Altar. Man's earliest altars were living flesh and blood, and man's natural instincts and predilections were the foundation on which his religions were based. Later religions, in making man's natural inclinations sinful, perverted his living altars into slabs of stone and lumps of metal. Satanism is a religion of the flesh, rather than of the spirit. Therefore, an altar of flesh is used in satanic ceremonies. Alright, spend the majority of the chapter talking about the intertwining of the elemental and spiritual and psychological world, and now say, nope, it's all about the flesh. No. All religions are about the flesh. They might have different philosophies about how it's done and the interconnectedness of the universe, and only one of them is correct. In my opinion, none of them, but there is a correct answer. I'm Gnostic in that regard. But saying that there is such a thing as a completely spiritual religion is not true. Even the religions that deny the elemental mode of being, that say cast away everything to do with your body, cast away your possessions entirely, destroy your body that your spirit might be made stronger and freed, even then the body plays a role in how rituals are performed, and the creation of the body in their ontological view is important. The purpose of an altar is to serve as a focal point towards which all attention is focused during a ceremony. A nude woman is used as an altar in the satanic rituals because woman is the natural passive receptor and represents the Earth Mother. Okay. Sexist. Again, there can be dominant woman. There actually was, I know that there's one prominent feminine author that says that to be a woman and having penetrative sex with a man is inherently a submission to manhood. But no, it's all about how you view it. You can be, oh no, I'm being pierced, this person has domination over me, or I am surrounding them, I am encompassing them, I am dominating them, and it all comes down to your performance and your understanding of the moment. And hopefully both participants are on the same page in that regard. I mean, in the gay community, when there's penetrative sex, who is the bottom and who is the top doesn't always correlate with who is the dominant and who is the submissive. I mean, even in the case where a dominant and submissive role is created, not all sex requires a dominant and submissive. So this is another old-fashioned idea. In some rituals, nudity for the woman serving as an altar may be impractical, so she may be clothed or partially covered. If a female is performing the ritual alone, no woman need be used for the altar. If no female is used for the altar, the elevated plane used for her to lie upon may be used to hold other devices for the ritual. For large group rituals, a trapezoidal altar I love trapezoids, about 3 to 4 feet high and 5.5 to 6 feet long, can be specially constructed for the woman to lie upon. That's an odd shape to choose, considering that one side... he means that it's going to come up like this and the woman would lay upon it like that, or vice versa, I guess, like a cot shape almost, without the indent. I thought that he meant looking down from the top, it would be a trapezoid, but she'd be laying on top of it, a trapezoid. Anyway. If this is impractical, or in private ceremonies, any elevated plane may be used. If a woman is used for the altar, the other devices may be placed upon a table within easy reach of the priest. You may enter, just know that I'm recording.
You know that the trash is gonna go out, right?
Yes, I'm aware.
Okay. Just bring it down to the end of the driveway where the blue barrel is, and I'll move them in the morning, because I'm gonna need to park.
Understood.
Okay? I'm gonna get that number for Janet tonight
Mm-hmm.
for the bus driving job. So
Okay.
I have a meeting tonight, so. Okie dokie.
Very well.
Love you.
Love you too, Anne. My mother, taking care of business. She's a good woman. Anyway. Symbol of Baphomet. The symbol of Baphomet was used by the Knights Templar to represent Satan. Through the ages, this symbol has been called by many different names. Among these are the Goat of Mendes, the Goat of 1,000 Young, the Black Goat, the Judas Goat, and perhaps most appropriately, the Scapegoat. Baphomet represents the powers of darkness combined with the generative fertility of the goat. In its pure form, the pentagram is shown encompassing the figure of a man in the 5 points of the star. The pentagram is shown encompassing the figure of a man. 5 points of the star, 3 points up, 2 pointing down. All right. Symbolizing man's spiritual nature. In Satanism, the pentagram is also used, but since Satanism represents the carnal instincts of man, or the opposite of spiritual nature, the pentagram is inverted to perfectly accommodate the head of the goat. Its horns, representing duality, thrust upward in defiance, the other 3 points inverted, or the Trinity denied. The Hebraic figures around the outer circle of the symbol, which stem from the magical teachings of the Kabbalah, spell out, one moment, Leviathan, the serpent of the watery abyss, and identified with Satan. These figures correspond to the 5 points of the inverted star. The symbols of Baphomet is placed on the wall above the altar. Yes?
I'm looking for hot dog rolls that were sitting on top of the fridge.
I ate them.
What should you eat them with?
Peanut butter. I'm going to be out near CVS later, so I can pick you up more if you want.
No, not at CVS. They're expensive.
All right. The candles used in my other mother, also a very pleasant woman. The candles used in a satanic ritual represent the light of Lucifer, the bearer of light, enlightenment, the living flame, burning desire, and the flames of the pit. Only black and white candles are to be used in satanic ritual. Never use more than 1 white candle, but as many black candles are as required to illuminate the ritual chamber. As are required to illuminate the ritual chamber may be used. At least 1 black candle is placed to the left of the altar, representing the powers of darkness of the left-hand path. Other black candles are placed where needed for illumination. One white candle is placed to the right of the altar, representing the hypocrisy of the white light magicians and the followers of the right-hand path. No other light source is to be used. He's ignoring a very vital point of the symbol of Baphomet, or Baal, or Baal. And that is the idea that he's a symbol of duality, both the spiritual and the physical. Like, if you see the full body of Baphomet, they are man and beast, aka goat and human. They have they have breasts and a penis or phallus, that they're man and woman, that they are of the air and the earth, that they sit upon the mountain, that they have wings, that they have the moon and the sun that they point to above and below, and even the Hermes snakes around the phallus, about the pursuit of knowledge, and the star upon their forehead. All of that is about duality, rather than being purely of the earth or denouncing anything. Baphomet is a very old and very symbolically potent figure, and reducing them like this, I don't think is good. And just in the spirit of duality, having white and dark is important. And I wear black because I think that darkness it's an encompassing thing. It's where everything becomes whole again. And when I'm out in the colorful world, which can be anything, and which all emanates from the darkness, from the chaos, I want to be able to carry a piece of the darkness with me. But the fact that if you want to discredit the right-hand path of white magic, which you refer to so many times in this book, why have a white candle at all? Why, in the words of political speakers today, why give it a platform, especially on the altar? It's just going to be a distraction unless you believe in duality, in which case allowing for various candles would be more appropriate. Of all colors. Ironic that this is only the second video that I've made without candles as a light source. No other light source is to be used. Black candles are used for power and success for the participants of the ritual, and are used to consume the parchments on which the blessings requested by the ritual participants are written. The white candle is used for destruction of enemies. Parchments upon which curses are written are burned in the flame of the white candle. I see. The shattering effect of the bell is used to mark both the beginning and the end of the ritual. I'm glad that they've changed the effect of the bell to say shattering. Like I said, it's like clarity of the mind, a shock, shattering. The priest rings the bell 9 times, turning counterclockwise and directing the tolling towards the 4 cardinal points of the compass. This is done once at the beginning of the ritual to clear and purify the air of all external sounds, and once again at the end of the ritual to intensify the working and act as a pollutionary, indicating finality. The tonal quality of the bell should be loud and penetrating rather than soft and tinkling. Chalice. In Satanic ritual, the chalice, which I thankfully did not just break, used represents the chalice of ecstasy. Ideally, the chalice should be made of silver, but if a silver chalice cannot be obtained, one made from any other metal, glass, or crockery may be used. Anything but gold. Well, I guess it is glass, but gold is pretty. Gold has always been associated with white light religions and the heavenly realm. Gold has been associated with wealth and power, and since white light religions all over the world, people want to be associated with wealth and power, they use the wealthy, powerful material. That's what it's about. The chalice is to be drunk from first by the priests, then by one assistant. In private rituals, the person performing the ceremony drains the chalice. Elixir. The stimulated fluid, or elixir of life, used by the pagans, has been corrupted into sacramental wine by the Christian faith. Originally, the liquor used in pagan rituals was drunk to relax and intensify the emotions of those involved in the ceremony. Satanism does not sacrifice its god, as do other religions. The Satanist practices no such form of symbolic cannibalism, and returns the sacramental wine used by the Christians to its original purpose, that of stimulating the emotions necessary to satanic ritual. Wine itself need not be used. Whatever drink is most stimulating and pleasing to the palate is in order. The elixir of life is to be drunk from the chalice of ecstasy, as indicated above, immediately following the invocation to Satan. They will deny that Christianity is a sacrificial religion, but it is. You are sacrificing Jesus for your sins. It is a human sacrifice as much as it is a sacrifice of God. And it's definitely, no religion is without sacrifice to a certain extent. However, there are many religions which do not include a sacrifice of a god. Sword. The sword of power is symbolic of aggressive force and acts as an extension and intensifier of the arm which the priest uses to gesture and point. A parallel to this is the pointing stick or blasting wand used in other forms of ritual magic. The sword is held by the priest and is used to point towards the symbol of Baphomet during the invocation to Satan. It is also used as indicated in steps of ritual when calling forth the 4 princes of hell. The priest thrusts the point of the sword through the parchment containing the message or request after it has been read aloud. It is then used to hold the parchment while introduced to the candle flame. While hearing the requests of other participants and while repeating the same, the priest places the sword atop their heads in traditional knighting fashion. For private rituals, if a sword cannot be obtained, a long knife, cane, or similar staff may be used. The phallus. The phallus is a pagan fertility symbol, it's a fertility symbol for everyone, which represents generation, virility, and aggression. This is yet another device which has been blasphemously converted to fit the guilt-ridden ceremonies of Christianity. The phallus is a non-hypocritical version of the aspergillum, or holy water sprinkler, used in Catholicism. Quite a metamorphosis of the common penis. The phallus is held in both hands of one of the priest's assistants and methodically shaken twice towards each cardinal point of the compass for benediction of the house. Any phallic symbol may be used. If none is obtainable, one may be made from plaster, wood, clay, wax, etc. The phallus is necessary only in organized group rituals. They actually make advanced ones of those that do a little spurt from time to time, and I feel like that would be very fun to incorporate into a ritual. You know, spray people as you go. The gong is used to call upon the forces of darkness. It is to be struck once after the participants have repeated the priest's words, "Hail Satan." Wait, isn't that a little bit redundant? You have a bell and a gong? Alright. Hail Satan. A gong is necessary only in organized group rituals. For the best tonal quality, a concert gong is preferred, but if one cannot be obtained, any gong with a full, rich tone may be used. Parchment is used because its organic properties are compatible with the elements of nature. In keeping with the satanic views on sacrifice, The parchment used would be made from the skin of a sheep, which was, by necessity, killed for food. An animal is never slaughtered for the purpose of using all or a part of the animal or a part of that animal in a satanic ritual. If commercial parchment which has been made from already slaughtered sheep cannot be obtained, plain paper may be substituted. Whenever we consume anything, it should always be done with respect for the sacrifice of that thing. Or person, whatever you want to call it. The parchment is the means by which the written message or request can be consumed by the candle flame and sent out into the ether. The request is written on parchment or paper, read aloud by the priest, and then burned in the flame of either the black or white candle, whichever is appropriate for the particular request. Before the ritual begins, curses are placed to the right of the priest, and charms or blessings are placed to the left of him. Be funny if someone mixed that up. I'm sure that's happened before. And in a little bit under 2 hours, I did just finish the Book of Belial. I think that we made very good time just because so much of this was describing ritual as opposed to establishing philosophical ideas like the rest of the book has been. Which bodes well, since the Book of Leviathan is all about the ritual. I'd also like to clarify here, I'd like to go back, the difference between the two rituals. Because it seems like he spent the majority of the Book of Belial talking about greater magic. Two categories. Ritual and ceremonial, which we've spent the most of our time discussing, is going to be the main focus of the last page. Or non-ritual or manipulative. Oh, I understand. All of that stuff about glamours and fascinations, that was the non-ritual manipulative magic. All right. And with that understood, I actually, aside from McGuffey's Reader, don't have to look up anything from this chapter, so that's nice. From this whole book. Makes my life easier because I still have so many other questions I'd like to answer. Hope you'll have a lovely day.